My name is Sanam Naragi Anderlini. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the International Civil Society Action Network, ICANN. We run a network of women-led organizations across 14 countries in Asia, Middle East, and North Africa. And I live a very strange life because when I read the newspapers in Washington and I read about the Middle East, North Africa, and so forth, it's all about violence and young men being angry and represented by lots of other men and so forth. But the people I work with, the women particularly, have a very different vision of the region. And when we get together, it's very interesting because all of a sudden you see Syrians very happily talking to Iranians, very happily talking to Egyptians and so forth and so on. And it gives us a lot of hope to see that across our region, at least half the population, when they're given the chance, are not at war with each other by any stretch of the imagination. And in fact, we think that they represent the vast, vast majority of the people in our region. And so the challenge is, how do we get those voices out? How do we get them to be heard? And how do we get them at the tables and places where decisions are being made on their behalf and for their futures, whether those decisions, whether those tables are in Europe or in America or in their own countries. But their voices really are not at those tables, and it's really important that they are, because the commitments to peace and social cohesion and plurality are extraordinary. The panel today, this afternoon, since we spent a lot of time this morning really going through many of the problems, and of course it's very complex, what we thought was to give you a little snippet, and it really is a very short snippet because everybody does such extraordinary work, of the kinds of examples of innovative activities that are on the ground in various places, so that you can see how people have taken it upon themselves as NGOs or as activists in different capacities to tackle these problems and address the issues of preventing radicalization, offering alternatives, transformative alternatives and so forth, so that we can then learn from that and figure out how do we scale them up, how do we adapt them, how do we make it so that what you hear today becomes more the norm and less the exception, in a sense. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleagues. I'm going to call everybody by their first name because it's the afternoon and now we all know each other, so we can be friendly and just say what we want. And I'm going to start with my colleague and good friend, Antti, who's sitting to my left here, who is with Finchurch, and you now run a network of religious leaders, is that right? So could you start with telling us a little bit about your work and what you think has been going on? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sanam, and let us know if our voices are not heard. Thank you for the question. So the Network of Religious and Traditional Peacemakers is a new initiative, and thank you OSCE for also showing the interest. It's an initiative of UN Mediation Support Unit, and the co-founders are also the Alliance for Civilizations and OSCE, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Religions for Peace, and Finchurch Aid. And the key funder donor for this has been Government of Finland. And now we've got a core partner also, Casey, the Dialogue Center based here in Vienna. And our aim is to work with the local religious and traditional peacemakers in the war zones and support them better. Sanam, I have to start with a confession. I often try to avoid coming to these conferences, and it's, I have to give also credit to OSCE. I think it's been fascinating discussion, but somehow I feel that often the big picture is not seen. And how could I share that? Last year I was in a conference and a lot of people were speaking about ISIS in Iraq and Syria, and I said that it's going to be an issue of 16 countries. Now we know there's a fingerprint in 16 countries. I would double the number of the countries. So the realities will be again different next year, and the talk will be different, and we're still responding something which is not providing and hasn't provided a solution to the previous issues. While we're also actually making situation worse in many cases. I will just pitch a bit to Europe, and maybe OSCE can take a note of We had a retreat with European Institute of Peace trying to analyze what's going to happen in Europe, and obviously we expect a major conflict in the Middle East. We see the North Africa being in a turmoil, and because of not only the refugee crisis, this will be a European reality, but if you look inside Europe, you see very different kind of responses to the current situation. I don't see a European-wide policy, and that's not likely. There is not a popular support for the EU to be a leader on this. We will see fragmentation. We'll see some countries responding with policing, with intelligence, with violence, legal issues, and that will push the divisions even further. And we will also see good stories of inclusion and just rule. Schlussel mentioned the European notion of Islam. I told him that you can't have it alone. You have to engage in a dialogue with the Salafi and the Wahhabi, and while you have the center here in Vienna, that's a perfect venue to have this type of dialogues of shared values. If we are able in a small scale, village, city, country, a broader scale, to establish a notion of just rule, the people will protect that place and that area. If you look at the history of Spain, where Islam and Christianity used to be together, that is the example of the 10, 15 years to come. But we will also see bad examples. But I think what Jussana also wanted us to tell is that if among us wouldn't be middle-aged experts of international meetings, but the young people we be speaking about, like some colleagues say that if you're not on a table, you're a part of the menu. So they're part of the menu. But you asked us, what would they say? Fincher Jade is asked by the government of Finland to convene the religious groups to organize their cooperation with the law enforcement to counter violent extremism. And we had a meeting about 2 weeks ago where one of the youth got really confused and angry, and he said, 100 have left from Finland already, and 100 are waiting to go any moment, and what you're planning to do is not going to address that issue. So then I said, okay, bring us 20 of these guys. Let us meet them and ask what they think. And so we brought the police, and we went there to meet them, and we started raising hands. I don't know if this applies to other European countries, but all of them raised they had passed high school or the vocational training. 20% of them were continuing education. 10% were having jobs. 90% of them were without family. They had come alone. And 80% were homeless. 80% were homeless. So when you become 18 in Finland, even though we have a social welfare system, you're kicked out of these homes. And they're living somewhere, confused. The families are either begging to come here and the police is blocking, or they want money. And these are perpetrated by drug smugglers. And they're stealing sometimes something. And ISIS is targeting exactly this group of hundreds of young men without family and without ties in Finland. And the police said, this opened our eyes. The smoke between this issue and these real human faces got away. Of course, there's other people and other stories. So then the guy said, always we meet and talk and there is no result, so what's going to be different here? And I said, okay, what do you want? Well, if we could just play football, the Ramadan, we have nothing to do. We would want to have a Ramadan Cup. It's $1,800 euros that we need to rent the field. Can somebody raise the money? And actually half of them wanted to go back to their football clubs to play. So then we agreed to have a game, police against the boys. So the police will need to pay for the tickets of the boys to return to the clubs. And they will meet their guys, play with them, see the talent in the guys, and the emotional kick that they will have after the game when they are seeing these normal, decent guys without a future will change the narrative of the police on these people, and it will eventually generate a cooperation between them, because there is active recruitment and the best counter messaging is from the youth. And if a recruiter goes to a group where somebody starts to challenge that youth, they go away. They see that, we're going to get trapped if we stay here. So it's what these youth speak and what they say is the most crucial. And reaching and doing things differently with them is what I would recommend. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. 2 thoughts on that. One is, we also see the situation getting worse and worse on a global scale. And unfortunately, in my network, we talk about it as a 21st century version of World War III, that it's not so obvious in terms of armies and so, but it is coming. And really, we need to think about it in a much larger scale. On the other note, I was in Jamaica a few years ago interviewing gang members. And it was the same story. You say to them, what do you want? And eventually I said to them, what do you want for your children? And one of them said to me, I want my children to be well-mannered, go to school, have speak well. And I thought, so do I. You know? And so this has become one of my things when I've met Talib leaders, I've met Somali elders, I ask them what they want for their children. And it's extraordinary. We all kind of want the same thing. And yet that's not a conversation that we have at the higher political levels of mediation and peacemaking and so forth. That very human aspect of the football and the social belonging side of the story. It sounds simple, but yet it's missing, and it would be very nice to see how you can scale that and really make it effective. Because it can't just be large. It has to also be, people have to feel that individual feels as if they own it. So I'm going to turn to you, Robert, because you're also working on these issues, but with a different community. And can you share with us what you're doing and what they would say?
Thank you very much. I will. I just loved your opening, Antti, with saying, let us know if our voices isn't heard. I think it was such a good start for the session. So my name is Robert. I work for an NGO called Exit Sweden, what we do is we work with people who are involved in white power or neo-Nazi environments in Sweden. Supporting them who want to make a change and leave that type of environment. What we see out of our experience of almost 17 years of work is that when young people engage in these type of groups, it's very, very seldom ideological reasons. I haven't met many 14 years old reading Mein Kampf thinking this is what I want to do with my life. But I see a lot of young people who are frustrated, who lack the sense of being part of society, who lack the sense of the feeling of I can make a change, I'm important, my voice is heard. On the topic, as you said as well, where is the young people and their voices today? So this is really one of the common themes that we see with people. So the work is a lot on focusing on how do we change the perception of yourself in order to change your perception of others. Because a lot of it is not ideological primarily, but other type of drive forces. So to look on those and see, and I think sometimes at these events, and I've been to quite some conferences, there's a need for a kind of a toolkit. This is what we have to do. But I'm afraid because I think that there's no universal toolkit that would be able to implement and be kind of this is what we have to do. But there's a whole range of different things that needs to be done. One of the things that's clear from looking at the European Commission's Radicalization Awareness Network, where I'm involved in the de-radicalization group, is the role of different actors. So Exit is an NGO, and I think that looking at this type of work, NGOs are crucial in terms of building bridges and relationships to people in vulnerable communities, people outside of society. In groups where you don't trust police, you don't trust social authorities, criminal justice systems or others, you would need the different link of actors who could provide that type of link to society and credible messengers and gain that trust. And it takes time. I see so many projects throughout the years I've been working and throughout Europe and other countries or areas. I think projects are very good, but if we want long-term change, we need to look at different type of works, different type of changing attitudes among people working.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. You mentioned that you need the essence there, but you can't be cookie cutter in terms of the work. And in our work, we always say it's almost like saying you need some core ingredients, but the recipe will be changed depending on whether you do it in Afghanistan or in Sweden, or but it's going to be meat and potatoes and oil and but it'll taste different in each place. So that's interesting. Also, the point about NGOs, because what we're also seeing is the NGO sector is being squeezed. We have a lot of colleagues in the Middle East, North Africa, and women human rights defenders are being killed, being targeted. NGOs are being attacked by governments. In Egypt and so forth. A lot of our colleagues are under tremendous pressure, and yet you're saying they are such a profoundly important bridge between different sectors of society. So I'm going to turn to, go ahead, yes.
Just one note on that as well. We had a national econom make a socioeconomic calculations on costs for white power activists in terms of understanding the engagement in another type of setting. So Exit is a small NGO. We get about 180,000 euros per year. It's not very much. And what this national econom looked at was what does the cost, what types of costs are involved for society for engagement in violent extremism. So he didn't make a complete map, but he identified around 250 variables of society that's involved in paying for a young person's engagement in white power, and that was not including security service, and it was not complete. And still, low calculated, he found that for society, one person cost 3 million euros, which is a lot of money. It's a lot of money that society already pays for people in these type of groups. So the need and the importance of actually getting funding there for prevention, for NGOs is just crucial.
Thank you very much, yes. So, Hasina Safi, you have been in the forefront of the NGO work in Afghanistan in very difficult circumstances. Working with women, also incredibly difficult. So how do you see this, and what in terms of both the conversation we've had so far, but also in terms of your work, what are you doing, and how do you see certain solutions, and what would the women on the ground say if they were here? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sana. I would like to pass regards to all the audience and thank OSCE that they gave me time to participate and share my views. And I would start by one saying that with regards and with respect to all the men, women have challenges all over the world. And the only thing which is different is the face of the picture is different. But with Afghanistan, it's a little different because in Afghanistan, we have had a lot of challenges. Still we have, and we are thinking that in the future we would have as well. But the good thing is that we are ready for it. We are ready to fight it, and we are ready to struggle for that. And I think a very concrete success indicator or example is myself, sitting with so many other nations in the world representing the women of Afghanistan. And no concrete example can be as such. What we do is we never thought that someone who is working in a village, going from home to home, discussing, explaining the role of women to them as you are a human being, you have an identity, you have the right to speak at home, not only cook and bring children. We never thought that today we would be sitting in a panel and we would be giving recommendations to OSCE how the work of OSCE can work in a better result and impact in the lives of women, which is very much related to the community and to the society of the world. I think we started, I will give one example. Before the example, I want to talk about a saying in Afghanistan. We have a saying that instead of being afraid of an issue or a problem, try to get into the problem. If you want to solve the problem, try to get into the problem so that you understand what is the cause of the problem. And if you are definitely a wise and analytical person, you can start from easy and you get to the difficult. And that is what we did. I think there is no need that I explain the situation of women in Afghanistan. What kind of circumstances did the women of Afghanistan went through? But still, we did not lose hope and we participated. In 2002, in 2010, there was a jirga. I don't know if you know the meaning of jirga or not. It's a big national level consultation where the tribal leaders, the influential people, the religious leaders, all the people, they sit together and they decide and they take very authoritative decisions about the nation, what should we do. The name of that jirga was Peace Consultation Jirga. So we as a network, we have a network of 126 civil society women-led organizations who are our members. And we have more than 3,000 individual members who are women. They are teachers, doctors, housewives, nurses, everywhere. But it's all over Afghanistan. So we got a memo from the government that can you introduce 4 women who can participate in this jirga. And then we sat and we thought that, okay, who should be those top 4 women who would participate in this consultation on jirga? And we had a lot of women because we had really worked and struggled. So we did not want to waste those expertise and those capacities outside watching online or maybe in TV or something. And then we sat and we said, how should we sort out the problem? We referred back to the legal framework of Afghanistan, and then we saw that in our constitution, we have some very friendly and supportive articles which allows the women to participate in the national processes. We rejected the memo from the government and we said that we want our right or our participation according to the constitution permit, which is 27%, 25%. It is more than 20%. There was a big dispute between the civil society and the government. They said, oh, the women are now trying to take everywhere. They are trying to take. But we did not say. We said either we go for more than 20% or we don't participate in the jirga. And here I can say that even the OSCE can analyze its role, that there was pressure on our government from the international community because of gender mainstreaming and giving role to the women. So later on I would talk about that, but this is also important. Thus, there were 2,000 participants in the jirga, and we got 240 women, finally. So that is how we started. It was a very clear example. Okay, they allowed us, but now we had to collect 240 experts who would sit with religious leaders, who would sit with tribal people, who would sit with influential people, besides the ministers, deputy ministers, and these people who thought that women never have the capacity. They are just yelling all the time or having workshops or having programs. So in the first day of the jirga, before that, we organized a workshop and we said that, okay, whatever we do, we go and sit in the jirga. In tea break and lunch break, we come and we discuss the challenges which we face in the first session or second session. But the most difficult thing was that how do we first face the religious and conservative people of our country who hide their faces from us. When we entered the jirga, there were some religious people who hide their faces with their scarf, the men, because they said it is not allowed. And imagine how would we think? We were very much inside afraid but very brave outside. We didn't show to anyone that we are, for example, afraid or we are losing, for example, or we are trying to get influenced by them. In the first day, all of us were a little down because we didn't talk a lot. In the afternoon of the first day, what happened is that we slowly started giving examples. We gave the example of Muhammad's mother as a very wise woman. We gave the example of Muhammad's wife as a businesswoman. We gave the example of Muhammad's wife as an advisor to him. So slowly and slowly these religious people thought that, oh, these women are not the women who are unaware of what they are doing. So they sat with us in a group. The scarf which was here, it went here. So we started discussion. In the second day, in the third day, and finally in the last day, it was a 5-day jirga. In the last day, we lost our visiting cards. It finished because each of them were asking that, please give us your cards. When you come and visit our provinces, please come and sit with our women and daughters. Which will take us to what Sanam was saying before, that we have to try. We really need to see and analyze what the other party wants to do. The way I'm telling you, it is very easy, and you can understand it, it's very easy. But how we have suffered and how we have done it, it has taken us more than 3-4 decades. I am going to be 40 this year. I was a refuge when I was 5 years old. The whole 39 years of my life, I have struggled. Why I have struggled? Because I don't want my children to face the same problems which I have. I don't want the children of my nation to face those problems that I have faced. I don't want the children of the world to face those problems which Afghan children have faced. Thank you very much.
She's going to be running for president soon, so just watch for that out. We're now going to turn to Croatia. And tell us, Nermin, about what you do in Croatia with the Muslim community and with the government, and what the issues are actually that you've been dealing with as well. Thank you very much.
In the first place, I would like to thank you for the invitation and for this possibility to speak today here about some positive examples we have in Croatia. Because, as we all know, the dialogue doesn't have alternative. Many times when dialogue stops, the conflict escalates, and then afterwards, what is paradoxically, everybody gathers again, and with that, the same dialogue they stopped before, they stop the conflict and end up with agreement. At least they stop this violence we witnessed many times. So in Croatia, Islamic community exists at least for the last 100 years. We have the recognition of the Islam by Croatian parliament in 1916. To be precise, on 27th of April, Croatian parliament recognized Islam as one of the institutions of the religions within the state. That was the, so to say, starting point of the development of the institutional organization of the Islamic community in Croatia, for which today we used to say that this is one of the best, if not the best models we have by far in this area of arranging relations between the state and the religious community, especially when it comes to Islam. It is positive example because Croatian society on one side and Islamic community on the other, and Muslims passed through very, very, so to say, challenging times where they had to fulfill two processes. The first one is the readiness of the Croatian society to accept Islam as it's one of its parts. And the second thing is that Muslims were also ready to integrate into the Croatian society. These are two things that are the most important for this kind of symbiosis we have today in Croatia. Afterwards, even though there were ups and downs, so to say, in development of these relations, in 2002, Croatian government and the Islamic community in Croatia signed an agreement in which we have defined our rights and duties and the position within society. And also what is more important, we got the responsibility. as Islamic community. That means that in Islamic community in Croatia has one official representative. It is a Mufti of Croatia who is here today with us. And also he is at the same time a president of Meshihat. And he is the only person who is responsible for teaching and also speaking about Islam officially. So there are no separate Islamic communities or more Islamic communities in Croatia but one. And that is the other thing what is so important is that Islamic community in Croatia, it is international, so to say, Islamic community. Because we do not gather around ethnic, national or any other origin, but solely around religion. And we only deal with religious matters in our community. We do not have this, so to say, political or any other activities like somewhere else where you do not know whether somebody is speaking in front of the religious community or some political or any other movement or organization or party. Also, it is very important to say that Islamic community in Croatia, by this agreement, is autonomous. It defines itself by internal acts, its structure, and also the fields of its activity. But also it is everything in framework of the legal framework of the state of Croatia, and of course, in line with the, so to say, this law on position of the religious minorities and religious communities in Croatia. What is also important to say that we have developed this system of responsibility where we have concluded, so to say, development and setup of the internal structure in a way that we are doing everything institutionally. For example, by this agreement we have inside the possibility to have our education institutions, our media, guardianship in hospitals, in jails, in military and police service. Also we have this question of the halal food and all aspects of our life, even Sharia marriage. So this is very complex, so to say, even though those things are mentioned sometimes in general, but in practice they are functioning. That is the most important. The most important thing that in Croatia we do not have this declaratory. You will see and hear today, we have passed the law on this, we get that. We have heard from our sister before that she's speaking about empowerment of women. Sometimes we say, okay, you are empowered, and so what? There is no system, there is no possibility that you can use that, what it is, so to say, guaranteed to you by the law or something like that. But in Croatia, I have to say, even though I am not from any political party, I am the member of the Islamic community and Secretary General, and I'm speaking here as a member of this community, that we have the system that is functioning, and that is the most important thing. What is also important is that this has all these rights and implementation of the rights in Croatia as a result that Muslims perceive Croatia as their own state. In Croatia, Muslims are ambassadors of their state like any other citizens. And they are not the enemies, they are not frustrated like in other countries, and that is, I think, the most important thing, that they can live their religion. They are the citizens like any others. And that is a very, very positive example, I think, that we have here. So if there are, I hope that there will be questions and also that there will be interest for this. We are ready to offer to everyone the possibility to speak about this. I know that the time is not it is short, but there is plenty of this that we can say right now. So I will just, so to say, finish with this, that, for example, when fighting for the liberation, or so to say, in the war for the independence in Croatia, around 25,000 of Muslims defended their country. The second thing is that 1,180 of them give their lives for the Croatian independence. So they were ready to pay the highest price to fight and for these values we have in Croatia, which were furthermore developed afterwards, of course. And it is important to say that the total population in Croatia of Muslims is 1.5%. In some other countries, you have much higher percentage of the Muslims, but much lower position in terms of their rights and position within society. Thank you very much. So.
And we will come back with questions and so forth as we move forward. And then our final speaker is Mr. Roman Bogdasarov, is that right? So from a different perspective now, right, between the church and Russian society. So we get another picture of what's happening. So great to hear what you have.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to say some words about the situation in my country, in Russia. I'm the head of the Secretariat of Interreligious Council of Russia and also a deputy head of the Church-Society Relations Department for Church-Society Relations of Moscow Patriarchate. I don't know with what to begin because so many spheres where we work together with Muslims and Jews, but I want to tell you some story from the Bible. Because we discussed today the question of critical role of women and youth. We say it's a story like anecdote, but that woman is the second and better stage of a man because she was created after the man. The first creation was when you read the Bible, you can read that first was the man and then was created the woman. And we say this is the version number 2, the better version. So it's like a joke, of course, but every joke has some serious moments, if you know. Well, you know, our dialogue between religions is based on women's faith. It is I can say, the result of the years, hundreds of years of real faith of Muslim women and Christian women and of other traditional religions of Russia. Why? This situation, I can explain, began. We won't look in the history, but let's remember the Soviet times when all the temples in our country were closed and the religious people could not even pray at home. It was government punishment for this. And women, with their small efforts, could provide the continuous service to God from the Russian times, from the Russian Empire to our times, when the temple are now opened. Women could struggle the system that did not give any people opportunity to pray and to read Bible and so on. Nowadays, I often travel by regions of Russian Federation as a head of secretariat. I wear my clothes as a clergyman, and I've been to Chechnya, to Ingushetia, and to other republics of Northern Caucasus. And the head of Chechnya region, Ramzan Kadyrov, he gave me the present a book about his mother. And he told that this is the faith of his mother that helps him to survive and helps him to give peace to the people of his region and to make the dialogue between Christians, Muslims, and so on. When I went to Kazakhstan, the head of Kazakhstan's parliament, Mr. Tokayev, also told when we spoke drinking some tea, he told that he has a very religious wife, and that's why he understands the main aim of the interreligious dialogue. In Russia, again, we have many examples. For example, the wife of our Prime Minister, Svetlana Medvedeva, she is a very faithful woman, and she helps church and other communities She is the head of many charity foundations. That's why I think that Russian Federation is the country where we can even now see the real role of the woman in the interreligious dialogue in the society, where we know that we have many problems as any other country, but we can solve these problems because we have good basis. This is the basis of real faith into the country, a real faith not only into some economic events, but the faith for the future based on the family. We have now many samples of law that protect family, the traditional family in our country, because we understand that any effort to discredit this, to destroy the traditional family would hardly make our country let our country to become unstable, maybe. What else can I say? That traditional religions in our country work in different fields. We help, we together, Christians, Muslims, and other traditional religions, help people who are very ill. We help people who are in jail and need the prayer and so on. Even when were Olympic Games in Sochi in 1914, Interreligious Council of Russia helped to maintain multi-confessional centers where people of world religions could come and feel comfortable for their religious views. We have many opportunities now because there is a law of freedom of conscience and the freedom of faith, and this law allows people in our country to have to feel themselves protected from any kinds of different things that destroy this interreligious peace, like different pictures on the leaders of different religions, like destroying even the temples. So the law protects in our country all religious people, and I think this is the main thing that we can show the world now. Thank you.
So I'm going to open it up to the floor. As I was listening, for me what was interesting, one of the things that sort of seems is a common theme, is that on the one hand, we're all in this environment since 9/11 of being in an environment of sort of fear and isolation and fearing the other. And the idea that the only way to communicate, in a sense, has been through military means. And yet, really, what we're seeing is that the minute you humanize, the minute you have a dialogue, the whole dynamic changes, right? And so if we don't have that dialogue, that space for communication, given the communication technology that is out there, is being filled by somebody else. And maybe that's why ISIS has been so effective. They're actually reaching out and talking to people when the rest of the world is, when the mainstream is saying don't talk, right? And then it's a small initiative. So it's really that countering and humanizing of the other, which is such an important piece of all your work. Okay, so if you have questions, would you like to sort of 1, 2, 3, 4? We'll do a round of 4 and then we'll come back. And then I'll come back to 5 there. Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Would you like to go to the mic and then we'll
Hello, thank you very much. I'll be very short. My name is Ilya Sichrovsky. I'm from the Muslim Jewish Conference, interfaith organization that's grassroots-led and founded in Europe, but also working internationally. Basically, the point that I wanted to make, and I think it's a very interesting dynamic in this discussion, is that traditionally the people in power in their own countries are afraid of the youth and the NGOs because they're not controllable. But this poses a dilemma because they may be female, they may be gay, they may be activists, maybe have an agenda or something in mind that the people in power are not so comfortable with. So here is where I really want to urge the international community to stand up and start losing the money in the right way, which is give it to the youth and give them the chance to make their own mistakes. Empower them by going out there and giving them the means to do something with it, even if it's not working out the first time, and do it before they had to collect 75 internships, 43 letters of recommendations, or 45 have their own family and have nothing to do with youth anymore. So I think this is the main crucial part. And the second that I wanted to highlight is, again, the international community needs to make sure that these players, people like us, have a chance to meet in private and talk about what's best sharing and best practices. If you have a conference where you team up diplomats with young entrepreneurs and activists, what's going to happen is that all of them are going to run after the two diplomats in the room because they need funding for their organization. So it would be really, really helpful to actually put us in a room for 2 days without the official oversight, pay it, fly us in, and then listen to what we have to say. Thank you very much.
They might think we're very dangerous people, you understand, as NGOs. You know, so 2 days on our own, we're gonna revolutionize the world. Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Darinel Rodriguez from the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict, GPAC. First, thanks for all the presentations, and I especially I appreciated Robert's presentation because it takes the discussion of radicalism away from religion. You know, because I think we've been talking a lot about religion, and radicalism and extremism is not about religion. And I see a lot of the very same principles that we're discussing here applied to political extremism, political radicalization. I'm originally from Colombia. You have this radicalization between, are you a leftist or are you a right-winger? And it's exactly the same thing, no? If you go to other places in Europe, it's not about religion. It's about, what's your nationality, or are you from this region or this other region? Thank you for taking away the discussion from that side. If you look at the different ways of radicalization or common traits, and it was in the panel before about the incentives for radicalization, some were mentioned, very few ideological incentives, economic incentives a lot, but group belonging incentives. So my question is, looking at those incentives for radicalization, how have you worked to create incentives to counter radicalization? And knowing that this is difficult because the incentives of radical groups are often very powerful, how have you managed to create counter-incentives to combat radicalization?
Thank you. We'll hold on to that, and then we'll take 3.
I am 4.
And then yeah, exactly. So these 4, and then we'll come back and do a round of answers, and then come back. Would you like to? Would you like to come now, or do you want to wait for the second? Okay.
Right, thank you very much for that. Well, exit strategy is one of the things that we as counter-terrorism people look as an example, because the extreme right, white power in Europe, European countries, are actually what the extremists in other societies are. They are the marginal ends of a very big society. So what you do with the exit is very important and very relevant, in fact, for the others. And I think if you could share do you share your experience in a comparative way? And if you do, we'll be happy. And I think the US colleagues here would agree with me that we in GCTF, Global Counterterrorism Forum, we think our lacking component might be the youth, in fact. We should fund you and leave you in a room on your own. And we live, most of us here, possibly with teenagers in our houses, and we know actually how it goes. So yes, I think that's a grand idea, and I think we should take that. And you would maybe tolerate us in the room, our presence. In terms of the youth and the hate, the Afghanistan example, I know there had been roundtables where we had been contributing to police, particularly female police component to enforce that. But of course, without a general police component, without structure in place, gender is not helping. If you cannot provide security, in a hard security environment, soft security measures are not able to protect and are not feasible. And it's big investment. So heart security from the beginning, ensuring that you have a secure environment to introduce this youth, culture, education, and police and community policing in that respect, which is necessary. Therefore, I would think the hard security environment, still we need the intelligence, still we need the police, and still we need the military at some stage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My question is, in an attempt of building the bridges, building the trust, and working on distrust, and identifying youth and women as vulnerable groups, and where's the thin line that once you build that trust, especially with the law enforcement and security, with vulnerable youth and with vulnerable women, that you don't step on the other side of it when the law enforcement and the security doesn't use the gained knowledge and intelligence against that vulnerable youth, doing no harm. And this is one of the challenges my team is facing in Central Asia. And in one hand, we are trying to build trust between vulnerable youth especially. And at the same time, we hear a week later that there was a crackdown by the police. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then one last, yes, go ahead and then.
Mine's a very quick one as usual. A question. Yesterday, the King of Saudi Arabia said that human rights in Saudi Arabia would be based on Sharia law. Now, how do we understand women's rights under Sharia law? That's the first question. Second question, do Islamic leaders recognize unconditional equal rights for women? And does any survey exist with respect to this problem? Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to come back to the panel and just get your thoughts if you want to answer a specific question, if you have a comment to make, and then I'll do another round as well.
Thanks, Sanam, and I'll continue this conversation on countering extremism, I often use a comparison of the countering violent extremism that it's like it's a broken system now. We have to confront that. It's I use a comparison where somebody's living a suicidal lifestyle, drinking and smoking and doing all the nasty stuff, and then when this person gets sick, he thinks or she thinks there's a doctor that can take the dead cell out and I can continue my lifestyle. The underlying causes what makes people angry and what makes them feel alienated is not addressed. So I don't think any counter-messaging, countering violent extremism program will function in the end if you don't address these issues. In the core is the inclusion of the communities. And if you get the communities act against the terrorist organizations that use these communities as recruitment base, then you're on the right track. But what the communities are living with is in marginalization. The security operations are hampering them, and the terrorist organization are attacking the same communities. I'll take a few examples, and to be fair, I think, for example, in Somalia, in Al-Shabaab even, there's people who might support or even support the drone program because they're not happy with their leadership and they don't know how to deal with it. But if you think Al-Shabaab, 2 of the previous leaders have been killed by a drone, first Robo and then Godane, and what people say, you even get worse. So it's not providing a solution. What I would tell those who plan the drone programs is that the mothers are much stronger. If you get them on board, then you have a chance to win the game. Second is and this comes back to the role of women. Wajir in Kenya used to be the safest city in the whole East Africa for, I think, 3 consequent years decided by Interpol. And what happened in Wajir end of last year? This was this terrifying attack on the university. The origins of the disputes in Wajir were when Al-Shabaab came in and detonated a bomb on KDF, Kenya Defense Force convoy, killing 2 soldiers. And the same convoy retaliated and attacked the market and burned the stock, value of 200 million. Totally innocent community. And now the KDF is asking, why is this community against us? Why don't they tell us when there is something wrong? But there is good examples, and Sanam, you know perfectly well the Isiolo Women of Faith. You have been working with them, and they have become the model for the local Kenyan peace councils. And just this week, they were training other communities in Mombasa in a workshop we co-organized with them. So the women, they are really powerful. And I just want to say, Hasina, to you, I don't know if our service is of any help, but people like you are a determining factor for us. If there wouldn't be people like you, I wouldn't do anything. There would be no hope. So thank you for sharing your story.
Well, thank you. It was a couple of questions. I'm not sure I'll be able to answer all of them as good as I want to. But on the gentleman from Colombia, focusing on CVE in general, I think it's important. It's interesting what you mentioned with the right and left wing groups as well. Looking at the practices of de-radicalization and disengagement initiatives, there's not perhaps one size fits all, but there's some very promising guidelines and principles that seems to be very key in this. And one of them is actually linking to the name of this event, bridging relationships, people to society, and promoting dialogue, not confrontation, but dialogue. So I think this is key in terms of CVE work at all, or disengagement work especially. And the question on exit work, how we do, well, I think that since we work very individually focused, depending on who you are, you would have to have a different type of approach if you're 14, 15 years old and you've been involved in the summer, or if you're 40 years old and you've lived in this environment for 20 years. You would need totally different assessment. For the 40-year-old, we would think about security, we would think about tattoo removal, about readapting into society in a different type of way than if you're 14 years old and you had a tough summer and you've been involved. So I think in a sense, describing the work we do is individually based, working a lot on relationships, trying to link people who want to leave the movement to other good sources in society. And there's so many good people out there that want to engage and want to do, perhaps don't know what to do or see that there's this role. But if we help them to understand why it's important for social services, police, school, or whoever to engage, most of them see that this is really, this is a chance for me to make change. So I think that type of communication, what is my role in CVE? Because CVE sounds very far from school or from social authorities or from ordinary society, but if we get it down to the individual level, what does it mean for this person? It's a different kind of knowledge and attitude. So, yeah, thanks.
I would have two comments. One on our friends about networking. I very much support that, and I think that is indeed very much needed, maybe once or twice in a year for planning. And the second thing about building bridges, our friend said that it does not work. I have two suggestions for you. The first one is that when you try to build bridges, after a month or 2 months, please assess yourself and see what went well and what did not went well. And what did not went well, what is the reason? I have the answer also because we have seen this building bridges in Afghanistan, and we had many, many losses as a result of that. So the second suggestion is that try to understand the context of where you are trying to build bridges. Where you are going and where you are working, try to understand it traditionally, culturally, from different aspects and perspectives in order to be helpful to the people, in order not to annoy them more and more. And I totally agree with my friend about female police in the structure, especially if there is a legislation supportive framework that can very much help the female police.
There was a question about the preventing and fighting radicalization. We have mentioned many times that it is about education, and I think that I have heard yesterday that someone says, okay, there are educated people who have done many wrong things. But in the end, when we think about this, all those who had committed crimes and started terrorist attacks and something like that, they were not dumb people, so to say. They were very intelligent, but used their intelligence for a very wrong thing. So education, but education in institutional education, which will have the responsibility as well to for all these things. The second one was about the Sharia and the women. It is very interesting that always when you mention Sharia, you cannot put in the same word sentence, so to say, women. Why? Because the general perception is that the Sharia is so exclusive towards women. But you have to, and all of us have to make a distinction. One thing is Sharia and the Sharia rule. The second thing is chauvinism. That is something totally different. Because you know the way how, so to say, women have to wear scarf or something like that is not to cover its face. And that's not the part of the Sharia. That's part of the custom law, for example. Segregation of women, denying the right to education, participation, public service, something like all these things, what are elementary human rights, are something what are part of the wrong interpretation of the Islam, the part of the male chauvinism. It's not a part of the Islam. That's as simple as that. And again, I can say that this is something where education plays, so to say, so important role. We have, of course, you can now mention thousands and thousands, so to say, of the examples in different countries where this is just the opposite, as I have said. But when you take the, so to say, sayings of the Messenger of Muhammad, alayhi salam, what is one of the sources of the Islam, where he also helped to his wife, consulted it. Also, they were talking and discussing different things. Ali, for Shia, so to say, population of Muslims, who was also doing, so to say, female jobs, as we sometimes say, even though those do not exist. Then we can see that in Islamic tradition, from its early beginning, there is this, so to say, and also the Islam itself also changed the position of the women in general at that time. We are speaking, of course, in 7th century. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, in Russia we have some humoristic television program named The Club of Joyful People. There in this program, all regions of Russia, including Muslims and Muslim people and Christian people, on the stage make some different scenes where they speak about their traditions, their faith, and speak with the language of normal people, not with the language of high religious leaders. And you know, there was a question about how we struggle the radicalization or extremism and so on. I can say that this is the bridge between the religious tradition, the scripture maybe, and the real life of people who just want to live in peace and to have their families, to educate their children. The bridge is made from the normal relationship between different people in our country. I'm speaking about our country, of course, Russia. We say that if you are a Christian, you can go to any city, any town, any village in any region of our country, and you will have the hospitality, you will have the house, and anyone will give you, if you need the food and so on. There are traditions in different regions. There are traditions that speak that guest is the most important man when he comes to the village, and this is the the thing that unites people. Many forces try to destroy this communication. They try to say that there are some laws that you must not go through, but we in Russia say that the God's law is the biggest law, and the state also understands the position of traditional religions, and that's why we are together live in peace. Thank you.
Just wanted to add two thoughts to the conversation. One is, when we talk about policing, even in a hard security environment, the role of the police is first and foremost to protect civilians and citizens. And one of the questions we always ask, especially as women, is when the training is being done, how much is actual protection of ordinary civilians, women, men, boys, girls, at the core of police training, right? Not just a half-hour gender session or a half-hour human right, but really at the core, because the police is there as a service. And if you as a police force are being oppressive towards the community, that already in and of itself creates a lot of problems. And we see that. We've seen that I think in Iraq right now. We've seen it in Afghanistan and so forth. So the issue of the police being there as a service to the public, as opposed to a force that uses its power and its uniform and its weapons to be even more repressive, I think is something that we really need to be tackling. On the question of the King of Saudi Arabia, two thoughts on that. One is, I'd really like to have a conversation with him. Why not? About human rights, because when I think of the UDHR, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the right to food, the right to shelter, the right to education, the right to free time, the right to live free of violence, which of these issues does he have a problem with, right? So we kind of bundle human rights as this label and then throw it away as a Western concept, but it was actually negotiated by Islamic scholars, Christians, Buddhists. They all contributed. That's why it's universal. So I think we should have pushback there. And if he really doesn't like that, then in terms of the Sharia part, I'd like Hasina to sit at the table and interpret Sharia, and the Wajir women to be at the table, and all the women from the Muslim communities that we work with who are practicing Muslims, who really take from their faith and have a strong human rights-based approach to their peace work, and take it and are inspired by their faith. But are they willing to have women actually at the table? No. So that I think is where the problem ends up lying, that it's about patriarchy, not about religion. Okay, next round of questions, comments, and we have about 17 minutes. Yeah. Would you like to come to the microphones and just kind of one at a time? Yeah, go ahead. Yes, go ahead. Of course, yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Maged Mosleh. I'm from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Egypt. First, a quick answer to is human rights compatible with the Sharia law? This is part of education. There is nothing called Sharia law. There is no books called Sharia law. We can say, is it compatible with Islam? And yes, it is, and there are zillions of studies on that. But sometimes we are, how do you say this, victims of our own culture, thinking that our cultural interpretation to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights is the only reference. We need to widen up the scope a little bit. Second, and I will not get an applaud for that, I'm sure I totally disagree with you. If you sit together, you will talk to each other, and not much will come out of it. I hope sometimes we have a slightly small experience here that in Egypt, for example, every minister has one of the youth as his advisor. And there is an advisory group of youth. But if you sit together, what will come out of that? How are we going to implement your recommendations? On the contrary, no, we have to sit together. We have to have more bridges, more channels of communication, engaging you rather than building, how do you say, isolated islands. You talk to each other, we talk to each other, and then what will happen? So definitely, I disagree with you. Terribly sorry for that. Last but not least, yesterday, I got the feeling that we are in utopia. Freedom of the media as if there is no hidden agenda. NGOs as if we have no hidden agendas. Everybody is a saint. This is not reality. Political parties, they set up NGOs, they have their media, they have their newspapers and their channels. So let's be careful about that. Let's not say, everybody is really a saint coming with a solid message. Let's look at the hidden agendas and be careful to what we want and how we want to deal with NGOs. Not to restrict them, but just a little bit of reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I would like to ask distinguished speakers to elaborate on the role of youth in bridging dividing peoples. To my own point of view, youth is playing an important role in this regard, and the role of states is to promote free interaction of youth. If we don't want to pass our problems of past to our younger generation, then we should let them interact with each other. We should promote exchange of students, of youth. And second question, we would like to ask speakers to elaborate a bit about role of human rights defenders, about peace advocates, prominent journalists, academia, in, again, bridging the divided peoples. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zsuzsana Pap. I'm from Budapest, Hungary, representing a small NGO. We are working with restorative justice practices. We try to implement them and build dialogue. So I could relate to what you were saying on many, many levels, but what struck me the most was the long-term implementations and the long-term possibilities. And I also feel that if you want to make change on a system level in the long run, oftentimes what we see also in building dialogues between communities, within communities, is that we need trust, as you were mentioning, and that takes time. And also, if you think about prevention methods and education, those are all, thinking, requires thinking in long term. So my question is, because this is a best practices panel, in terms of long-term fundraising, what are your best practices that you could share? Or if it's a challenging topic, then what might be the needs from your NGOs that, I don't know if you're saints or not, but I definitely see that you guys are really authentic and credible people. So without having the possibility of abuse, what those NGOs who really want to make a change, what options have you got? Thank you.
Thank you. Should we come back? Would you like to do a round of responses? Yes? Oh, there's one, one more. Yes, one more, and then yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Steve Coghlan from Pax Europa. My question is, we're just holding an article from Al Arabia, republished from the Saudi Gazette, where it says that the king came out and said, the kingdom's keenness in protecting human rights in line with Islamic Sharia. And a comment was made about whether women can wear a hijab or not in Sharia. I don't think that was the question put. And I think that the question is, not for the Islamic world, but for people in this forum who are not Muslim, representing non-Muslim countries, is there not a duty to be competent, that it's the duty to know that now we know that, for example, Saudi Arabia says that their understanding of human rights has gone through the filter of Sharia, and there is the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam that says basically the same thing on behalf of all 50, I think 57 member states. So it seems like everybody's going to say it's Sharia and it goes in a basket, and people who want to say it's all flowers and love get to say what they want, and there are people who want to make a harsh understanding of what it is. Isn't there a competency standard here that if this is in the mix, if we hear somebody from an Islamic country speak to the fact that Sharia guides human rights, that there is a professional requirement to know specifically what Sharia says or doesn't say before getting into a discussion about what can and cannot be done or what is or is not represented, that's based not on what your friend or your associate told you, but what you can garner from published documents that state something that can be taken as evidentiary. Thank you.
Thank you.
I obviously can't answer, Steve, your question, but what I would advise you or the team be careful is that those within a tradition or religion usually have the biggest significant impact. And while making generalizations, you also undermine or attack these people. So I would advise to listen and protect these. I'm going to finish this with a slightly different note, because there's a lot of government representatives here, and I just want to illustrate to you what type of problem you're having ahead of you. Somebody mentioned the CV summit in White House, and one of the examples given to the folks there was the Minneapolis model. Andrew Luger, the state attorney, was invited to speak about how well they're engaging with the Minneapolis Somali community, etc. So I met Andy there the morning he announced the detention of the 5 or the 7 Somali youth that were intending to go to ISIS, and he said, closed doors, you know, I still have a problem here, but I don't know what the problem is. And I didn't have time to explain him, but I know what the problem is. The guys he works from the Somali community are those who are with the government or with the military or with Ethiopia and Somalia. And those he needs to find are those who are opposing these people. And so eventually the ones who are with the military, the national army in Somalia, are not the gatekeepers to those who are fighting against them. And until that conflict is resolved, the problem will remain. So any conflict left behind will be your problem. And I'll just illustrate how huge the challenge ahead of you is. If I would ask you, what is the hell on the earth? Many of you would say Syria. Well, where in Syria? I'm sure some would say it's the Yarmouk refugee camp, the place of the 700,000 people that was isolated, bombed, and that refuge about the population of 1,800 last summer when ISIS tried to take over and the Palestinians kicked them first out. They came into that camp through a village or a very small neighborhood called Hazal Aswad, which was just a left alone land of few families where nobody was controlling them. And that's where the ISIS gained ground. They bought the families, they got involved, and that's where they attacked Yarmouk. And that's where they were pushed back. And that's where they took the revenge attack. So even this wasteland left behind can be an entry point and door open for the radicals to utilize. So that's how crucial understanding the grievances and fixing the problems is if we want to fix a global problem. Thanks.
Well, thank you, and I just want to tag along on that point. I think when we once again, when we think about reaching out and talking to people in violent extremist groups, you have to think about who is it that actually reaches these people. I mean, is it who is it that you want to use, and who is it that actually could make a change there? Sometimes I feel it's governmental campaigns is very good. They feel it's a purpose, but sometimes they're very far away from actually reaching the target group as well. So, and who is it that actually is so just to tag along on that point, a very good. And then on Zsuzsanna Pap from Hungary's point on fundraising and needs, I think in all NGOs, or a lot of NGOs, at least in Europe that I'm aware of, have the difficulties with fundraising because of the work that we do, working with perpetrators who want to disengage. Is difficult to get funding outside of governmental fundings because not many companies or funds want to sponsor rehabilitation from violent crime or violent extremism. It's difficult to have in your CRS strategy sponsor a former Nazi, but you would actually need governmental sponsoring for this type of work in long term, because sustainability. And thinking of time, some of the people we work with at Exit has been for around 10 years, so this is a long-term commitment. This is not a quick fix of 3 sessions and then they're out, but this is long-term commitment because it's a difficult role to change for people with long engagement in these groups.
Anybody else? I would like to talk about the women rights defenders, about their protection. I think presently in Afghanistan there are no mechanisms, but we are working with several states, like European Union is also one of the unions which we are working. But the issue is that we all the time try to protect women rights defenders or human rights defenders when an incident happens to them. So we never think about the prevention of that or about the pre-incident which is happening. This is one area which we all need to think about, and how we can support the human rights, women rights, and activists. And about the fundraising, the issue is the same in Afghanistan as well. But one of the things which we have worked out is we are trying to involve the private sector a little bit. We really want to make them understand the value of our work. Because once people know you and they believe in your work, then I think with private sector it is not very difficult. But it has not like ideally worked, 80%. We have recently started it like since the last 2 years, but this is our plan that in the future we can. So maybe in your country also you can involve the private sector and make them understand the value of the work on the global level.
I would like to say and mention, because it was a question about the good practices that we have, I forgot to mention one in Croatia that, for example, interfaith dialogue. There are certain occasions in the society and some situations where representatives of the religious communities, all of them who are recognized that exist in Croatia, 13 of them, they signed until now 13 joint statements about certain topics that deal with the ethics, morality, etc. That is something what is agreed, discussed together, and then in form of the statement presented to the Croatian society, just in a way to see what this, so to say, religious component, regardless of whether it is Christian, Muslim, Jewish, or any other community, what has to say about certain topic. And that is something what we see as a good way how to express freely your statement, opinion, and when it comes to the religion in society. Of course, debate then ongoes with other participants, but also religious communities are, in these cases, included as well.
I'm speaking about religious leaders because in Russia every man has his own attitude to the religion. We don't have non-religious people. We have people that fight with religion. We have people who are fully religious, I may say so. But that's why the interreligious dialogue is so important in our country. I want to tell about 2 examples because the question about practice interests me. The first example, you know that there are not so good relationship between Azerbaijan and Armenia because of the Nagorno-Karabakh territories. And the religious leaders of Azerbaijan, Pashazadeh, and the religious leader of Armenia, Gorigin II, met in 2010 and in 2011 with Patriarch Kirill, the head of Moscow Patriarchate, and discussed the theme. And the results of this discussion were real. Some people get freedom, and some people were not killed, and this is the result of the interreligious dialogue. And the second example I would like to tell you, it is my appointment, my meeting with the muftis of Russia. We had a seminar where I, for 2 hours, answered the questions of 50 muftis that represent the Muslim community of Russian Federation from Vladivostok to Kaliningrad. They are the heads of communities of about 10,000 people, so they represent a large amount of Russian Federation people who are Muslim believers. And we have a real discussion for 2 hours where I've answered and told them the Christian view on many problems, and we had a great opportunity to know each other better and to promote dialogue for the further times. Thank you.
Thanks, Sanam, and sorry, folks, but this is really important. Hasima said about the need to defend the human rights defenders, I want to include the religious leaders. And believe it or not, what ISIS first is targeting, it's even the old Salafi or the new Salafi that might oppose their agenda. That's the first ones they target and kill. And these people, nobody has shown interest to support them and protect them. And we have developed a plan in the network of religious and traditional peacemakers. So if there would be an entity who feels this is important, please come and talk to me.
Thank you very much. We're going to break for coffee. Just on the note of the NGOs, hidden agendas and so forth. The difficulty, of course, is that who monitors the monitors? You see, so how are we going to decide which NGO has a hidden agenda and so forth? And what we see often, I mean, if you want to be a cynic, you could say, you know what, if you have everybody's out there, it's a cacophony and really nobody's voice matters that much and the government can do whatever they want. On the other hand, you can also say that you allow that diversity of voices, and if you find them preaching or espousing something violent or intolerant, then you can shut them down. But to shut them down before they even exist means that we've ceded the space and we've created a vacuum, and in that vacuum come the extremists actually, because civil society by and large is not violent. And this is one of the, you might not like what they say, but on average most NGOs are not violent. They tend to want to do something constructively. So it's not, we're not angels, but we're certainly not the devil either. And so I think it's worth bearing that in mind. And if the opportunity to talk to the King of Saudi Arabia arises, I'm willing to participate at that table. I'm sure others would be as well. Thank you very much. Coffee now and come back in 15 minutes.